Hello again, it's been a while since the last video, but back making a new video here, and today I'm covering something that's quite important for racecraft, and that's how to race side by side. And a lot of people, especially inexperienced drivers, get this wrong frequently and cost themselves huge amounts of time, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Racing side by side is difficult to do without losing a lot of time. Often significant time is either lost when cornering side by side and unnecessarily, and that actually happens quite a lot in real motorsport as well, or when giving your opponent too much space that you severely compromise your line. And sometimes people aren't so spatially aware and end up not giving enough room. That can end up leading to collisions mid-turn. A couple things contribute towards uncertainty when driving side by side, and these things are narrow field of views on single screens and a poor mental approach to the situation. Of course, a triple screen setup can make the whole side by side thing a lot easier. You can see the car next to you and you can accurately tell where to place your car. But not many of us have access to this, and so we need to be a bit more thoughtful about where our car is positioned and also understand how our opponent is going to take the corner. If you often lose lots of time or struggle to pull off side-by-side moves smoothly, then I hope this might help you a bit. So when approaching a turn alongside an opponent, there are a few mental approaches we could have to it. And the first thing worth thinking when you're approaching that turn alongside your opponent, especially if you're on the outside, is that are you actually going to benefit going through the turn side by side with them? If you're on the outside, then you should only really commit to it if you're completely alongside your opponent or even slightly ahead. If you're a little bit behind or even further behind, then you're likely going to fall behind having the wider radius around the turn, and you could get pushed off at exit or just severely compromise your line on exit, and you're going to fall behind them. You're going to have to catch back up to them and try it all over again. And coming into hairpins, even if you are ahead on the outside, it's quite difficult to end up ahead coming out of the hairpin, but it's possible, so it's worth a try. But like I said, you got to think about if it's really worth it. Are you going to gain out of this, or are you just going to lose time and have to build it up all over again? So if you think about this and you decide to yourself that it's not going to be of any benefit for you to stay around the outside of your opponent, then the best thing you can do is just back off a little bit into the turn and prepare your exit. Try to give yourself the most amazing exit that you can, and therefore you create an opportunity on the exit of the turn for you to get around your opponent, because they're going to have a compromise line. If they're taking a narrower entrance to the turn, they're going to have a rather poor exit and not have as much speed. So you could get them on the exit. If you think about it right, don't necessarily throw yourself around the outside. It might not be the best thing. Now, with that out of the way, we can talk about 3 different mental approaches to driving side by side through a turn. One of these mental approaches is collision avoidance, another is kind of just turning and praying, and the other one is the quickest, and that is to take the optimal line you can through the turn while giving space by judging how your opponent is going to take the turn. Less experienced drivers, or ones who don't have the greatest racecraft, will generally either be going for collision avoidance or they're just going to turn and pray. And by that I mean, with collision avoidance, you're going into a turn creating as much room on either side of the track for your opponent to fit into so that you don't collide. You don't want to make collision, you just want to get through the corner alive. But why are you going into that corner side by side anyway if you're really trying to avoid them? You may as well just back out and go through and take a natural line. And I often see when people go for this collision avoidance kind of move into a turn, you look from the external view and the two cars are miles apart. The car on the inside might be all the way on the inside of the track, completely destroying their line for the turn, whereas they could be a lot closer to the other car to give themselves a much better opportunity to be ahead out of that turn and also not lose so much time. And some people are just too aggressive. They might go hard onto a turn around the outside, just hoping that the car on the inside doesn't run into the side of them. Or maybe the car on the inside might just go hammering it, brake really late into the turn on the inside, but just hope the car on the outside doesn't turn in on them. You do have to give your opponent some space. And a part of improving this sort of mindset is you need to understand what the trajectory of the car alongside you might actually be, especially if you're on the outside. If your opponent's in a bit of a collision avoidance mode and they're far on the inside, they might brake really late, and then they're going to drift out mid-track in the middle of the turn. They might run into the side of you. So just kind of understand where they are and what might happen. If they brake, if you can tell they're braking around the same spot as you, they may run kind of wide. If they back off, they brake quite early, then you can really go for it. If they brake really late, well then you better not commit to the outside. It's probably best you slow down a little bit more, try tucking on the inside. And the other thing to touch on is trust. Like, you really do have to trust your opponents when you're racing side by side. If you're at a lower level and the racecraft isn't quite as high, then you might have to play a bit more collision avoidance, or just, like I said, try back out and get the advantage on the exit of the turn because the car alongside you might brake too late. They might not mean to, but it happens. Now, with all of this in mind, and assuming you can trust the drivers around you, the best mental approach you want to have approaching a turn alongside another car is to try picture the most optimal line you can take through the turn, while also leaving a couple cars with gap for your opponent to fit through. Because likely if they're on the inside, they're going to try to keep as tight as possible. If you're on the outside, you want to make the most of the available space that you have without running into the car. And I say a couple car widths because you want to give that little bit of room in case the opponent drifts a little wider than expected. And the same thing if you're on the inside. Get as close to your opponent as you can on turn entry, get right to the outside without touching them, and then take the most optimal line you can. You have to slow down a little bit more than you usually would because your line's a little bit compromised. But you want to carry as much speed as you can through the apex. Don't drift out wide, obviously, into the opponent. That's why I say leave the space for them, but carry the optimal line through. And if you're ahead of them, then you have the right of way. They will have to back out of that move. If they're alongside or ahead of you, then you're still going to have to give that width, that car width and a half on exit. You really do have to judge it as it comes. When you're on a single screen, you really might not know exactly where your opponent is in proximity to you. They might be right alongside your door, they might be a little further away. And to get around this, the best thing you can really do is pay attention to the radars that are available. Not all sims have them, but if you're on AC, Assetto Corsa, then you can get the Helicorsa app. If you're on ACC, then you have the app by default. And you can get a couple apps, I think, for iRacing that do a similar job. And the other thing you can do, which most sims have, is you can set a button or a couple buttons on your wheel to look left and right. Then you can briefly just look alongside you while you're on the straight to see how close your opponent is to you. Then you can mentally prepare from there what you're going to do with the turn. Knowing exactly where your opponent is alongside you is very important to getting that turn right side by side. It could be the difference between you getting out the corner ahead, or falling behind, or just losing a whole bunch of time. It all comes down to your confidence in the car, the trust you have in your opponents, and just that mental approach you have to the turn. You link everything together and you can get through that corner in the most optimal way possible. I hope this might help a few people think about their approach to racing side by side a little bit more. So thank you all for watching. It has been a while since the last video. I do have some more ideas coming up bit by bit. With the Gran Turismo side of things, it's been kind of quiet on Gran Turismo lately. There hasn't been a whole lot of content worth making. I don't actually have a sim setup that's compatible with Gran Turismo at the moment, so I can't make much content on there right now. But yeah, it's a bit slow at the moment. I'll get back there if I really find something worth making. I did have a few ideas for Gran Turismo, but I just don't see them all that worth it anymore. And just quickly voicing over because I want to add something in. I know over the last couple updates, Polyphony have been changing the PP systems, so a lot of my guide videos that I've done for Gran Turismo, the setups that I've done for those videos, they don't even work anymore because the PP ratings have been pushed all over the place because of those updates. So the best thing I can do is that if your setups are a bit messed up, they're a little bit too high over that limit, then check out the video I'll put near the bottom of the description about decreasing your PP rating. That might help bump you below the limit, but quite honestly, I don't even know if it's worth putting the effort into making new setup videos because who knows what's going to happen in the next update. That won't even be too long from now. That could completely mess it up again. So as of right now, I don't really see the point in putting much effort into new setup videos when they could quite easily just be changed next week or the week after. I really don't know. Yeah, I'll see. A few things still to come up. Make sure to check out Camless if you guys are looking for a new sim racing wheelbase or pedals or anything, because I've been racing with it recently and it's really good. I've been enjoying it. If you'd like to see my initial review with the Camless GT1 wheelbase, then check the video I have at the end of this video in the outro screen. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you very soon.